We'll be starting the webinar in about 30 seconds. We're just giving people time to get into the session and log in. We got Vernice here, we got Ken, we got the other Ken. I see people logging in here. The counts are climbing.
Hey.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. We've got a Q&A and chats. We encourage everyone to ask questions. And then also, if there are any questions afterwards, you can email those into BigSpeak. We'll get those out to Ken and Vernice. We're also recording, and we'll be sharing the recording with folks after the presentation. So we'll give this about another 10 seconds, and then we're gonna kick off here.
T-minus.
T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome everyone back to the Mashup Series, and this is our special series that we're putting on selected Wednesdays for our audiences here. And today we've got two really special guests, speakers, friends of BigSpeak, friends of mine, who have come on to share their thoughts and some of their ideas about what's been going on these last couple of weeks and just for hundreds of years and what's going on in corporate America. There's been this paralysis in corporate America for the last 3 or 4 weeks of what do we do? We feel stuck. How do we help? What's really going on? And when we were looking for special guests to be part of it, I couldn't think of two people who would be better for this. We've got Vernice, who was in the United States Marine Corps. Thank you very much for protecting our borders and our liberty. And, Vernice was a police person. She also was the first African-American female liaison to the Pentagon on subjects of diversity. So she's really in this soup and really understands it well. And Ken has been very involved with Harley Davidson for many decades in terms of the marketing, the branding, their communications. So the two of them, both coming from iconic backgrounds and brands, having the backgrounds that they do, felt like a really good mashup for us to talk about. So I think what I'd like to do is, turn it over to you, Vernice, have you say hi to everybody. And, what's on your mind in the last couple of weeks as we've been going through this? What are some things that are popping up for you?
You said you were going to start off with Ken. Well, is he on this side or this, Zoom? Now, honestly, what's been going on with me is, it's been pretty surreal, very dramatic, as it has been for many. And I found myself sitting on my deck. Number one, all keynotes canceled as far as the eye could see, right? And it's like, okay, I hadn't done this, I hadn't done that, I didn't get this digital thing set up. So it's like, okay, playing catch up, what am I really going to do in this moment? So I had to pause and say, you know what? Wait a minute, before I'm just going crazy doing everything, what do I really want to create? Because I was really beating myself up pretty good. And I remember back in the first recession, for me anyway, I would get excited when somebody told me they were fired. I'm like, yes, now you can do what you've been scared and didn't have the guts to do, right? And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, if not now, when would you ever go for it, right? And I found myself having to say, okay, Vernice, you got to walk your talk. And it's like, oh yeah. So instead of just jumping in the hustle and bustle and endless Zoom meetings, I took nature walks. I journaled. I said, what do I really want to create? In 20 years, I'm going to be 57. No, 67, almost 70 years old. It's crazy. So fast forward through COVID, right? George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. And I'm sitting there thinking, crap, what do I do in this moment? I've never been political on my platform. I'm always not Republican, Democrat. It's just, gutsy leadership, create the breakthrough, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. And in that moment, I was like, but this isn't even a political issue. This is a humanity issue. And there's no way I can stay silent on this, but what do I say? What do I do? Like, I'm just one voice. I don't have 1 million followers or anything. But what I did know acknowledge is that I'm like, wait a minute, I was a cop. I was a soldier. I was in a National Guard unit, both entities protecting the protesters or keeping peace, hopefully, on our streets across the nation. What would I do if I was in that spot on the front lines as though keeping peace, having to push somebody back with tear gas and rubber bullets. You know, what would I do and how would I feel in that moment? Diversity officer for the Pentagon, Headquarters Marine Corps, where I've created policy for all of the armed services, you know, as part of a committee. And on the other side, Black, discriminated against in different ways, woman, discriminated against in different ways, gay, discriminated against in different ways. So I had all these dots. I'm thinking, well, crap, if I don't know how to connect the dots, how do people that don't even have that many dots or any dots connect the dots? So I started digging in, and I knew that my voice and perspective, by virtue of being on both sides of this particular aisle, needed to be out there. And you know, we'll get into some of the discussion, you know, during this live session, of course. But the bottom line is we all have to take action in our own way and in our world. And what I will say is silence. In the military, we always said silence is consent, you know, and in the real life, silence gives permission. And in some cases, silence is betrayal. Like, I'm not just gonna walk down the street, see a guy getting ready to rape or snatch a woman and like, oh, well, not my problem, not do anything, right? So how are we not being silent in this moment and standing up for what's right? So that is what I've been thinking about.
Thank you. Ken, what's been going on with you?
There's a lot. I gave a captivating keynote address to some squirrels out in the backyard this morning. That's kind of been the highlight of the day. Thus far, the Q&A session was riveting. You know what's interesting, guys, is that kind of what we're seeing right now, from my perspective, is kind of a collision of our very worst societal behaviors playing out in front of us. These are consequences for what we have collectively done to ourselves as a community, as a country, as a nation, as people. And I think what's happening now is we're kind of being forced to see ourselves for who we really are, both good and bad. And I know we'll get to some of that. But one of the things that I've talked about for years, you know, 25 years of speaking or going out and consulting or on, you know, podcast discussions with executives somewhere, is this notion that there's been a gradual disintegration of community, and Vernice, you just said humanity, over the last several decades that we are paying for dearly now. I mean, those of us of a certain age, we remember, you know, doing business with the mom and pops on Main Street. Most of them are gone, you know, obliterated by the giant behemoths. We don't have in the communities that we live in, you know, any attendance anymore in places of worship. Everything's going down. Participation in, you know, kid stuff, Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Campfire Girls, Little League, things that brought communities together have withered and disappeared to the point that we don't know who our neighbors are anymore. And if we don't know who our neighbors are, how can we be able to show them that we appreciate them, that we care for them, that their concerns are our concerns? And the answer is, it's really hard to do that. We've moved everything into the digital space, and where people don't talk to each other. We communicate with each other digitally. And the net result of all this is that we as a species are being denied one of our absolute most basic human needs. And that's the need that we have on the same level as food and water and shelter. That's the need that we have for validation, to have boost to our self-esteem, to feel like we're part of something, that somebody cares about us, that we're cool, awesome, needed, necessary, you know, all the things that are richly, deeply important to us as humans. And business people take note here that we as people, we remember and reward people who do that for us, who make that effort to make us feel part of something special, who validate us, who give us boost to our self-esteem and to our ego. And somehow, Ken and Vernice, I think all of that got lost in maybe the last generation or so. I think it's really sad, but I also think that what's happening now is shining a light on this and saying, this is our moment, folks. learn from the consequences of our past behavior, of the distancing that we've created between ourselves, of holding people back who do not deserve to be held back. It's time to start lifting people up, and we're starting to see that, trickles of that happening. And I see no reason why this can't be a moment of forward momentum that's going to make things positive for a lot more people going forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ken. And it reminded me, because as you were talking about, hey, we've been this gradual degradation, and we're kind of to this point, and it's this melting point where things blew up. And Vernice, when we were talking, the three of us the other day, you mentioned kind of a mindset in the military and in aviation, and I think you called it complacency kills.
Absolutely.
Right. So, maybe we could unpack that a little bit from, what that meant in the aviation industry and in the military to today. What was this complacency that corporate America was doing for this last decade or two, or, it's been 30 years since Rodney King happened. What's this complacency? What's it cost us? And what's the pivot going to be? What can we do?
Right. Well, first, let me give a little caveat, and I actually have this written. So this isn't about politics. It's about being proactive. This is about coming together and deciding what we can do as organizations to create an equitable culture for our employees, our stakeholders, and our customers that serve all involved, and to include our marketplace, right? This is about establishing rules of engagement, me, military, police officer, rules of engagement for civil, productive conversations that find solutions and not fault. Right? So there are some tangibles that we want to get out of this conversation. And I actually call this the new conversation. Now, there was an old conversation, and it looked like this. My dad was teaching me how to drive. At a certain point, he had me pull over. He said, all right, now what do you do if the police pull you over? I said, make my hands visible. He said, how? I said, put them at the 10 and 2. And he said, that's right. I said, but Dad, what if I didn't do anything wrong? It's like, it doesn't matter. And having to have that conversation, Black parents with their kids on how to come home safely at night, right, is super old. And the new conversation is the actions, not just how do we make things better, but how do we reinvent, reimagine who we are as a society? When Ken, when you talked about Little League and Girl Scouts, and I was in the Girl Scouts, I was a Brownie, and we did tend to know our neighbors more. And if we look at our history, we're more, believe it or not, together now racially than we've ever been, from slavery to Jim Crow to the 50s, 60s, white water fountain, black water fountain, and yes, 70s, 80s, when folks in our generation, families knew each other, but we were separate. And the more we're coming together and Blacks saying, wait a minute, what's happened in the past is no longer acceptable. That's the reckoning that's happening right now. And as a police officer, when I was that new cop, I was done with my training, and I was past my rookie year. I had my own take-home car, and I was in Nashville, Tennessee. I was excited. I'd wanted to be a cop since I was like 4 years old, right? Cop that rode a horse downtown, right? Mounted patrol. But I was in my car, and I said, I'm going to crack down on crime. I'm going to go to the tough neighborhood, right? I'm going to find warrants and drugs and suspended licenses. So I went to the tough part of town, right? And what was the tough part of town? Either Ken. I mean, we all know that's the Black neighborhood, right? And what was really happening, and I have no doubt that I was a good cop. I was one of the good ones. I didn't give everybody tickets, right? But in that moment when I was cracking down on crime as a good cop, I was over-policing my Black brothers and sisters. And one of the things that I can say is even good cops get caught up. This is not about good cop, bad cop. This is about behavior. And some behavior is systemically woven into the fabric of our society. And when you look at where policing came from, overseers of slaves, then the vigilantes who brought Black folks in newly freed slaves, or even later, you know, that were breaking the Jim Crow laws. And then, you know, of course, we see how policing was in the 50s and 60s. And if you bring it to current day policing, it's not just about changing a few escalation or de-escalation use of force standard operating procedures, right? We call them SOPs. We're really gonna have to look at what is our role in the community and how are we going to shift that. And I know this is going to offend some, but this us against them mentality. And again, I was the them, right? I was the thin line of blue. So that code of silence and protecting each other, and I mean, it's real. And how do we protect each other in the most productive way that serves all of us? And that's really what this conversation is about. So when it comes to corporate America and how are we looking at this new conversation, what are some of the things that have been systemically woven in? And we know the pay gender gap, and men usually get paid more than women. I shouldn't say usually. There's been research that shows many times men get paid more than women in the same exact location in the workforce, if you will. Some of that responsibility absolutely falls on the women. You know, if I go for a job and I don't negotiate my salary, and then I'm there for however long and I don't ask for the raise, then, and the guy is negotiating and the guy is asking for the raise, gaps are going to occur. Does that mean there aren't other things happening, you know, that are adding to this gender gap? Well, we all know there are things that are. Look at women on boards, people of color on boards. If I have a board of 16 people and I don't have a single person of color, is that okay? Not that numbers are everything, but it's an indicator. You know, no one pops out the womb born qualified. So how are we as leaders in corporate America making sure we qualify our pipeline? So all the leaders under the senior leaders have to make sure they're giving access and opportunity to those folks who are frontline workers who aspire to be leaders, and all of our frontline leaders and mid-level leaders, right, are getting the opportunity, access, and experience they need to be able to move further. So, and I call that gutsy leadership. You know, are we willing to, and I hate to even put gutsy with people of color. Why does it have to be a risk to advance people of color who are absolutely qualified, right? So I'll stop it there. Hopefully that answered your question. I know I gave a little background, but yeah, I want to make sure
I think
I use better sound bites.
Is you just put a spotlight on an absolute truism about business and society, and how society mirrors business, business mirrors society, and kind of humankind in general. And a lot of it is this tendency that people have, and God knows you see it in the business world every day, the tendency that we have to recognize that there's a problem or an issue, but kind of just sit back and wait for somebody else to, you know, to solve that problem,
right?
Make the problem go away. I mean, those that would deny that a pandemic could be horrible in America, those that deny that racism has held people back for generations and sat on their hands and did nothing, and then moved into positions of power in business, are now looking at themselves saying, the time has come, the light's shining on us, we've got to do something. You know, the oncoming train is right there. We have to put some action behind words here, because I mean, as simply as you can put it is, you know, a business, you know, has to know its audience. Who do we serve? Who are we here for? We need to look like the people that we serve. We need to be the people that we serve, which means we have to be inclusive, and not because it's a check mark, you know, on a diversity statement. It's because we need to celebrate humanity, for God's sake, because that's who we're here for. The inclusion of everyone at the exclusion of no one. And you're starting to see, at least I hope we're starting to see, some movement in that area. You probably saw news today that the you know, the Business Roundtable group of, you know, 200 of the CEOs of the biggest companies in America are now officially trying to put some voice, and then hopefully they're lobbying dollars behind police reform. not that they wouldn't be doing this, or not that they would be doing this individually or on their own. They've all kind of looked at what's happening right now and what the people they serve, the employees that are working for them, are asking for them to do. What are you going to do something about this? They're stepping forward. The $1 million or the $1 billion question will be, do they actually do something with this, or is it just a bunch of nice words on paper? If we go back to the nice words on paper mode of doing things, this country as we know it is screwed. We have to stand up, and we have to stand up now. And thank God people are, looking at this more seriously.
Absolutely. And if I can just say yes, yes, yes. And yeah, I put a post out, hey, there's some Tinder questions, or, if you need a place to ask questions, hit me up. A lot of people took me up on that. And so I had another moment of, okay, I need to be out there as a resource because people do have questions, and we need folks to not just have a conversation, but take actions, right? But even in the conversation, that is an action. My neighbors, well, Vernice, how you doing? I'm like, I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there. And I need all my white friends, to talk to your white friends. Why? Because white allies, just like people of color and corporate America, we need white allies, because we're not sitting at the table when the promotion comes up, right? And they're like, what about Tom? Oh yeah, what about Steve? Oh yeah, what about Amy? Oh, Amy. Anybody know Amy? All right, what about John? Insert picture name there, right? So we have to have the allyship, whether in our community or in our organization in corporate America, to help folks progress. And, I've had a couple of people say, well, how do I have the conversation without it being political or conflict or becoming an argument? You're not preaching to anybody. You're not saying you have to do this. You got to do it. It's, what do you think about the Black Lives Matter movement? What do you think about what happened with George? Do you really think racism is that bad? Like, what can we do about it? Asking some questions of others, right? To just start a communication. Black Lives Matter, what? All lives matter. Well, and you just stay calm. You don't have to, well, no, just stay calm, right? Just number one, listen, and then just lend whatever your perspective is. Well, when I'm at a cancer march, right, for breast cancer, I don't see people saying, all cancer matters. Why are we just marching for breast cancer? What about colon cancer? What about pancreatic cancer? I mean, come on, people. If my house is on fire and the fire department is coming to my house, it doesn't mean the other homes don't matter. It's just my house is on fire right now. And right now, Black people are suffering at the hands of injustice in many different ways, and not just the police. The police didn't kill Dr. King. The police didn't kill Trayvon Martin. The police didn't kill Malcolm. I mean, right? So the police didn't kill Ahmaud Arbery just down the road from me in Georgia. I live right outside of Atlanta. I don't even walk outside of my community on the country road anymore, because the climate here, I've never experienced the tension and the conflict like I feel it right now. And it's kind of crazy. And we absolutely have to take action.
That's also what makes it real for people. Like hey, I'm sorry, but as bad as the pandemic is, as it becomes more and more, politicized, which is just absurd to begin with, this whole notion of it's not real until it's in my home is kind of disappearing now, because now whether you're sick, whether someone has a pandemic, it's affecting you. Okay, and that's a huge eye opener for people, just like what I think is happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. Is you're seeing the protest, you're seeing people out on the street from every socioeconomic background that you can possibly imagine. It's bringing people together. This impacts all of us. We can't deny it anymore. Again, it's kind of the oncoming train that's in front of us. We see it coming, and now finally, I think I see people that are taking some personal ownership of this outside of the Black community. And I hope that continues. Why shouldn't
So do
What
I.
I'd like to see, frankly, is, again, I always say this: society mirrors business. If more businesses get behind this promotion of not this, we're all in this together, nonsense, because that is nonsense when you say it. It's what are we doing to make things better in the communities that we serve, the communities that we depend on to keep this business afloat, the communities that we depend on for our survival. A community is everybody, not just the market that you serve and the people that you hope buy your products.
Right, right.
Show some empathy, for God's sake. You know, be human, get involved, create positive change, because at the end of the day, you're going to be remembered and rewarded for it, versus those who choose not to are going to be remembered for their silence and apathy.
Yeah, people right now are absolutely looking at what are brands, and not just the major brands, but what are the companies that they're dealing with, even if it's the mom and pop store down the street, right? And I love what Netflix did. They're taking 100 million, putting it into banks that are helping marginalized folks, the small business owners that might need a $5,000 loan or that $50,000 loan that is the make or break of their business, not $150 million, right? And why are over 90% of, let's say, Black women-owned businesses not getting the PPP? Over 90%, you know, and just people of color, their business in general, not being ever able to leverage the PPP or the EIDL. How, again, are we getting the access and exposure out there from a business standpoint? And how are we putting pressure, our companies banding together to get other institutions to say, hey, okay, you're right. We need to do something different.
Well, anyone who's ever heard me do one of my rants or see me do a speech somewhere, or
give a rant right now,
who read my book, what do? I always hit three questions. What are people saying about you? What do you want them to say? And third, and most important, is what are you doing to make them say it? We're moving beyond the platitudes
That's
stage of what's happening right now. Now we're in the action phase, and what people want to see is action, and that's what they'll be remembered for. I think the Netflix example is absolutely stellar. They backed it up. What? They're being talked about today. Hello, that's how it works.
Yeah,
that's right. That's
and
right.
It's not an accident when you look at the Netflix leadership. And just yesterday, Bozoma St. John, who was at Uber and then over at WME, and now she's going to be over at Netflix, and then also Verna. So you take a look at companies and leadership, and they made intelligent decisions. Hey, we're going to put, women of color in these positions so that we can embrace diversity. It's not just a checkbox. We're really going to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I think that's really, really key. Same thing with Apple and Denise Young-Smith. So, right. So here's the challenge though. Those are the exceptions. And we can talk about those as they made a smart move or they made exceptions. When we were talking the other day, Ken, you talked about, hey, now's the time. Now's the time to get ahead. Diversity, inclusion, equality are not checkboxes. So how do we take this and make this a searing moment where we really make a difference in corporate America?
Any business, regardless of size, if you're a 2-person mom and pop or 100,000 person conglomerate, is that we have to make if it's diversity, if it's inclusion, if it's brotherhood, sisterhood, if it's humanity, if it's community, we don't need to make this something we talk about. We need to incorporate this into our business strategy. This is what we stand for. This is what we do. This is how we want to be remembered. This isn't a marketing function, and it's not a sales function. I mean, this is corporate leadership, right? This is what we want our employees talking about. This is what we want our customers talking about. This is what we need to ingrain in our DNA. And that doesn't happen as a business unless or until the people running the business make it a priority. And too many businesses, and we've all seen this and we're all suffering for it now, feeling the consequences of it, have spent the last several decades focusing all of their energy, all of their money, all of their corporate horsepower and talent on internal measures, efficiencies. Let's figure out how to do what we do faster, so we can sell more of it. And when our competitors are selling the same stuff that we are, well, we'll just find even cheaper ways to produce. And the inward focus has been one of the primary contributors to this loss of a sense of knowing who our market is. Knowing what community that we serve, what they stand for, what they represent, what they want from us. And we can do better than that. If we're going to be like the community that we serve, we have to be part of the community that we serve. And that needs to be, that's corporate strategy. That ain't marketing, and it's not sales. Make it a priority and it will become a priority.
Yeah. Absolutely. And to make it a priority, it has to be tied to economics, has to be tied to the money, right? Melody Hobson, just the other day, she said, when people will become accountable when it's tied to their paycheck and their bonuses. Look at Wells Fargo. They have put, and it's not just numbers again, right? It's like, oh, we got one of this, we got two of this, we got three of this. Are we good? Are we good? It's not about that. We're losing a lot of talent from many of our organizations, amazing talent that we would have otherwise retained, that we worked so hard to recruit, right? Recruit, retain, train, promote, recruit, retain, train, promote, and all that emphasis on the recruiting part. And that's why we have so many organizations where they say, oh, well, our numbers are good. Look at our numbers. But if you look at the pyramid, all the senior executives and the mid to senior, where's the diversity? It's like a cliff where people, again, aren't getting promoted. And the Harvard Business Review, over 76% of women are mentored, but they're not sponsored in the same way. So diversity, and everybody on this call, probably you already know this, diversity comes in many forms, whether it's Black, white, male, female, sales, ops. How are we looking at our talent, getting them qualified, they feel valued? Because when someone doesn't feel respected, valued, wanted, like they belong, we're humans. Humans have that innate reptilian wanting to belong thing, right? So they're going to go somewhere else. Look at our millennials. Again, diversity, 5 generations in the workforce. Millennials are like, okay, I'm in. If this isn't it, I'm out. So again, how are we retaining that talent, and how we're diversity management, right? Just like financial management, diversity just is how are we managing our people and taking care of our folks. And that's just all it boils down to. And unfortunately, some people in their thought process are behind the curve. We're not going to change people's behavior. Well, we are going to change their behavior. We're not going to change their beliefs and values, but we do want to shift their behaviors when it comes to how they're impacting our organizations. And again, our leaders, especially our senior leaders, we're going to have the guts to cut out the cancer in some of our organization and make the hard decisions, even if somebody's a top performer, but how are they impacting our culture? And are they a cancer inside of our culture?
Well, what people forget or never took the time to realize in the first place is that every association that we have, every thought that we have, every memory that we have about a business is a mirror reflection of the culture of that business. So businesses, you're not known for what you do, you're known for who you are. And to take that a step further, business culture is a direct reflection. It's a mirror reflection of the attitudes and the behavior of the people running the business. That's leadership. I mean, we do and say what our leaders do and say. If our leaders are
That's exactly right.
making the effort to be inclusive, to be more human, to open and just be open to this idea that we need to change for the better. We need to do this better. We need to be more inclusive. The employees are going to follow that lead. And a generation from now, hopefully we wouldn't have to be talking about this anymore.
That's exactly right.
That's the thing, is that at what point does this not become an issue? At what point are we just one and there's equality and there's diversity and there's an inclusion?
That's why we said this is the time, man. I mean, if this was ever in the spotlight, it's right now. People are going to be remembered and judged forever by what they do right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Or don't.
And let's be honest, there's always going to be something. Like even the teacher that she did that experiment back with the kids in the class, the brown eye, blue eye, study. I mean, there's always going to be something. Even when JFK was running for president, people were scared because he was Catholic. I mean, seriously, that's not even a conversation today. So this conversation probably won't be the way it is right now, won't be happening 30, 50 years from now. It will be something, but it's a journey. We're humans. We're always learning. We're always evolving. And it's just, how do we keep moving forward, taking tangible actions? And honestly, the first real step is acknowledgement. It's okay to say, you know what? things are screwed up. You know, why are we trying to desperately pass an anti-lynching bill in the Senate? We know that's wrong. We know it's not okay. It shouldn't even be a fight, right? And now some people are going to say the nuances of, well, what's lynching? And you know, come on. Georgia didn't even have a hate crimes bill. One of 4 states just passed it last week. How do we do the right thing? Period in the story.
Well, society shaping business and business shaping society. Look at what you're seeing with the big money companies, you know, pulling their ads from social media platforms that don't put the kibosh on hate speech. And it's like dominoes. You know, the big name companies get on and say, we can't participate in this forum anymore if there's going to be this, you know, an outlet for people to spew this stuff. Like dominoes, the big businesses are going to go. Then the smaller and medium businesses are going to follow their lead, like they follow their lead on everything. So that people continue to speak and speak up and push their employers and the people that they do business with, that enough of this doing stuff the way it's always been done. Take a stand for something, we'll support you for it. You'll start to see it happen. And I think that's what's happening right now. And we just need to keep that momentum going, not let this be a flash in the pan.
That's true. That's true. And the taking the action, you know, and one of the things I say is we have to move from protesting to shifting policy. And the protesters were protesting out there, right? Because we need policy to shift. But if you don't go vote, I mean, it feels like a cliche, go vote, but it's so true. When I was voting the other day, a 31-year-old woman was checking me in and I was like, have you voted? And she was like, oh no, I've only voted once in my life. I'm like, what? Come on. We can't just protest in the streets and then not go vote for the people who will implement and execute the policy that we want to see in place. And if you look at the policies over the years, I mean, it was illegal for a Black and white person to get married in Mississippi just until a few years ago. I mean, that was the law. So we absolutely have to shift, change the policies that are now in place. And then as a community, embody the spirit of what the law was trying to create.
Amen.
That's a really good point. Earlier, when you were talking about kind of the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs, Vernice, and just kind of needing to connect them, Ken, you talked about that the other day too, that the importance of a brand connecting either internally with their employees or with their consumers, that if the Gen Ys or the Gen Zs smell something that doesn't smell authentic, they're out. You want to say a little bit more about that and maybe how companies could be looking at this today, how to come up with those authentic values and then put those into place?
Well, I mean, it used to be, and everybody knows this, you'd sign on, you go to work somewhere and you'd very likely spend your, you know, entire career there. And then we became much more mobile and people jump from job to job. And what happens is most people in leadership, because I hear this all the time. So, you know, the biggest problem that we have, our most expensive problem is attracting and keeping people. And they say, well, when your people leave, why did they leave? And they say, oh, you know, they left to get more money. I said, come on, man. You don't believe that. Nobody believes that. I mean, if it's a 50% pay raise, yeah, you're going to go somewhere else. There's people leave because they feel that they're not wanted, they're not appreciated, they're not valued, and that their personal values aren't in sync with the leaders running the business. And I think that Gen X, Gen Y, your millennials are way more in tune to, you know, social consciousness and business values per se. And to your point, Ken, if people are going to show up somewhere for work, and if they're seeing behaviors that aren't consistent with their own, or beliefs that aren't consistent with their own, they ain't going to stick around to try to fix it. They're going to move to the next place. So that's a leadership problem. That's not a millennial, Gen X, Gen Y problem.
Mm-hmm. So Vernice, you're getting calls from, you know, people who have booked you for keynotes, friends, people in the corporate sector. What kinds of conversations have you been having in the last 2 or 3 weeks of people saying, hey, what do I do? How, you know, they're afraid. Maybe they're afraid to make a statement or afraid of what to do with a policy. What are some of those conversations, if you can share, and what are some of the things that you're recommending?
Well, you know me, first I have to tell a couple stories to set the stage.
Please.
So I'll share a little background here. when I was out in Iraq, flying that attack helicopter over the desert, before we could release our missiles, we actually had to get clearance. And the ground controller would say, you have permission to engage, cleared hot. Well, here at home, there are no ground controllers in life. You are your ground controller. If you don't give yourself permission, who will, right? And that was the big message in corporate America for me. Engagement. How are we engaging with our employees, our internal folks, and the marketplace, our stakeholders, right? Then as our brands mature, I was looking deeper. Well, what gives us the guts to engage, right? And that's where the gutsy move came from for me. In your gut, it's right, and it takes guts to do it. That's gutsy leadership, courage, power, grit, the stick-to-itiveness, to see it through. So when folks who know me, who have had me into their organizations, these leaders who are, thinking about having me help them with facilitating a conversation or navigating what's going on out here, you got to make your gutsy move. And most of the time, a gutsy move is scary. That's why it's gutsy. That dude had guts. There's something risky about it. And think about it, when brands first started putting Black Lives Matter on their website, it was like, whoa, oh my God, I can't believe they really stepped out there. Now people are looking at if an organization or brand hasn't stepped out there. Wait a minute. What, when General Mattis, he said he would never speak disparagingly about a sitting president. And he finally had to come out and just say something, because this is a general, a leader of Marines, right? And all troops when he was over in Germany, that what I'm seeing just isn't okay. It's just not right. And again, this is not a partisan issue. This is about our country. This is about our moral fabric, right? Our culture. Who are we as a community? And what does our Constitution stand for? When the Joint Chiefs walked out in his battle uniform from the White House, I'm like, I've never seen the Joint Chiefs in a battle uniform. Are you kidding me? A little while later, he put out a statement. And it's almost like after General Mattis went first, it gave permission for the other generals and senior leaders to step up. Again, not partisan, proactive. We're not finding fault. We're working towards solutions. So for my senior leaders out there, in situations, especially now, we are going to have the moral fortitude and the guts to do the right thing that gives permission for our people to follow that line.
That's such a great point, Vernice, because I look at the Netflix example that Ken brought up, or that you brought up a minute ago, about working with these smaller Black-owned banks or urban banks, and then a lot of other businesses. Well, yeah, we're not Netflix. We don't have the I don't have the money to do that, and that's not the point. The point is, don't do what they did. The point is be inspired by their lead here. They make the gutsy move. They say, all right, we're going to put our money where our mouth is and do something. That's the lesson. Yeah. Small mom and pop or mid-sized company. Right. Do it. Just do it.
What you just said, Ken, it's not about one individual. Like, what if, this is so funny, what if one person was protesting? Let's just rewind a little bit. Kaepernick, one guy was protesting. Couple people joined in, but it wasn't some huge mass movement, right? It's like, go protest over in the corner. It's not until, like the terminal velocity, right? Like we got to a critical mass of people where folks started listening. The boycott of the buses back in the civil rights movement lasted 362 days, but people banded together. And when it hit the system in the pocketbook, they finally broke and they were like, okay, right? So how are we not as onesies and individuals, one mission, one goal, one team, one country, right? One nation under God, indivisible, right? Coming together to create amazing breakthroughs, positive outcomes, as my healthcare folks love to say. How are we creating a positive outcome? Because we're hemorrhaging so much right now. So we got to get it together. And what if all the white people said, I'm leaving my bank and we're taking all our money to the black banks? Oh my God.
Right.
That might be it. We might have something.
Get buckled.
I need to start a bank. Wait. Let me start a bank first.
We'll be there for sure. You know, it's interesting because I was thinking of Kaepernick right before you were talking about him. And what's really interesting is 2-3 weeks ago, NFL apologizes. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's nice. Why don't you give him a job? Right? Like, you know, an apology is just, it's empty and it's hollow. And I think that's what's happening a lot in corporate America, is that there's these statements, and it's, you know, what my thinking is make a difference, not just a statement, and really put your money where your mouth is. So looking to brands to do that, and kind of what you said, Vernice, is, you know, look for brands who are embracing Black Lives Matter and support those brands. And then if there are brands who aren't supporting it, you know, vote with your feet. Don't buy that brand. Don't put your money in that bank. Don't support that brand.
Right.
But I think those are meaningful, impactful things. And you know, as we're going to wind up in a couple of minutes, I want to find out from both of you, you know, what are the 3 or 4 things people can do today? You know, what can they do in their organization? What can they do with their teams? What can they do with home?
Well, number 1, it's time to turn the conversation, which is an old conversation, into the new conversation. And number 2, it's time to translate the conversation or transform the conversation into tangible action, which talking gets it started, but then we have to take physical action, right? So how do we find a way, us as individuals, especially my conflict avoidant people out there, a way to face the uncomfortable issues without playing ostrich? It's like, if you got bad credit, not looking at your credit report is not going to make you have better credit, right? How to prevent a counterproductive herd mentality. What does that mean? The herd mentality, all going and everybody like doing the same thing. When I was in the Marine Corps and maybe something was happening that just was not okay, was not acceptable, some of the guys would come to me afterwards individually and say, dang, Armour, that was effed up. That just wasn't right, man. That was so horrible. It's like, dude, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you like help me? And it's like, well, you know, he didn't want to step out from the herd. He didn't want to exile himself. He didn't want to be skylined. So what kind of moral courage are we as a community, as an organization, as a company going to do to step up, all of us in leadership, to say, yes, we're doing this. No, we're not doing that. And again, and I've said it a couple of times, not finding fault, but absolutely finding solutions. And finally, how to set an example of civility where people are motivated. Again, the commander sets the tone. Our leadership sets the tone of our culture, where we create a culture and an atmosphere of civility where we treat each other kind in kind. Mm-hmm. Vote, attach money to accountability, that paycheck and the bonuses, and hold people accountable. We got to hold people's feet to the fire. I'm on a couple of boards, and the companies that are really making an impact, they're holding people accountable.
And can I just say, what about hire a Black person? Right?
And you know, I won't even just say hire a Black person. Hire qualified people, right? And we have tons of qualified Black people, and they have to have the opportunity and the access. I mean, look at the research study that looked at resumes. And if a name sounded Black, Shaquanda, Tyrone, Shaniqua, same exact resume with Justin Thomas, right? Got a look, and the other one didn't. So what are we doing in our hiring practices? How are we being, not just hiring a Black person and filling a slot, but looking at all the qualified, right? Because, you know, people are going to say, oh, you're just going to hire a Black person because it's Black. And no, folks, again, let's acknowledge there's an injustice going on and hire the folks, but give everybody the opportunity and the access. The Marine Corps did not have a Black female general until just this last year. They've still never had a Black female jet pilot. Does that mean because there wasn't one qualified? No, I had jet grades. I graduated number 1 out of my class of 12 and number 1 out of the last 200 to graduate from flight school. Black, white, male, female, anything, when I graduated on July 21st, 2001. I absolutely wanted to fly jets. There were usually tons of jet slots. That in the primary spot of my first phase of flight school, there were only 2 jet slots and I was the number 4 guy. That's why I made sure I studied my butt off and graduated number 1 when I went to that second phase, because no one was going to deny me. But why should I always have to work harder for the same thing? And that's all people are talking about when they say Black Lives Matter. They just matter as much as anybody else's. They matter as much as the white lives.
Mm-hmm.
I could have flown jets if I was.
Dude, your Harleys in those garages, some of them probably could be jets.
Totally lacking in the gene that has courage. I guess I didn't get that one. What I would want to say, Ken, is what I've talked about a lot in discussions with the businesses I consult with, the people that have called and asked me stuff about, what should we be saying? What should be, to let people know that we're still here, that we exist. We're all in this together. And I basically tell everyone the same thing, is just stop with the we're all in this together nonsense if you're doing it to sell something, if you're doing it to push an agenda, because you know what? It's offensive. The thing that's missing, and what I think is the magic word for everything right now in the world, from a business standpoint and also personal, is the word empathy. Look, I understand that your world is really shaky right now. I understand that you're worried that, you were a member of your family, somebody you love might get sick. I understand that you might not be working right now or working on reduced pay. There's a tremendous amount of stress. The news every night on the TV with the smoke and the people fighting and the yelling. I mean, these are tough times that are begging for empathy. Yeah, we're all in this together. I understand and can sympathize with the life that you're living right now. It's tough. It's tough for me too. It's tough for all of us. Let's make something positive happen from this. Let me be a source of relief for you. Let me take some of the burden of what you're feeling off your back. Put it on mine, right? If I'm going to serve you as a leader, I'm going to serve you as a business, as a provider, people want to hear that. People love to hear that, because guess what? They don't hear it. You see, I'm a salesperson. I'm a marketing person. I fix your car, and I know you're not bringing it in right now because maybe you don't have the money. What other bad things are happening in your life that I might be able to help you with right now? Put the challenge on my back, or on our back here as a business. Challenge us to help you. And guess what? We'll do that for you. And man, who wouldn't remember that? Versus we're all in this together, and 25% off if you buy before Friday.
Exactly.
Yeah, kind of the back to the fear and the greed that seems to be driving a lot of corporate America, is what are we missing out on, or what are we not going to get in trouble on, or how can we make more money?
Right.
Yeah, it's not about how do we create something memorable for the people that we serve. It's how do we get people to keep buying from us.
Right.
Totally different conversation.
Yeah, what I'm pulling from all of our conversation is humanity. Be good humans. Be good humans. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. We've got time for a couple questions, and I got a couple questions rolling in here. Great. So if that works here. Here's a question from Maggie for Vernice. Vernice, if you went into the military today versus when you started, what would be different for, as you said, a Black gay woman?
Well, guess you could be out as a Black gay woman. When I first enlisted in the Army back in '93, question number 11, I think it was, is are you homosexual? I said no, but I had stickers and t-shirts and stuff on my car. And as a woman, things were definitely different back in the 90s as far as sexual harassment or how women and men were treated. When I first enlisted in the Army, women could not be pilots in the Marine Corps because women could not be in combat. So things changed with Dakowitz in '93, which is how I was able to become an officer of Marines, leader of Marines, and fly attack helicopters in combat 2 tours in Iraq. What would be different? Honestly, I was just in a conversation with a lot of aviators this morning, and some of the statistics, again, the numbers are actually worse, if I'm gonna qualify a negative or better, than they were when I was in. So what would be different? Honestly, it feels like we would be fighting the same fight, and in some cases going backwards. I can't forget about my transgender brothers and sisters who are now not able to serve in the military because of a tweet, and now don't have health care under certain circumstances. So in some cases, we're not going forward. And what would be different is I'd probably be speaking up even more. Yeah.
So Ken, let's see if we can pivot this question a little bit to you, and even thinking of Harley Davidson, iconic American brand. You know, how do you think a company, Harley, or companies like Harley, how are they today in terms of career advancement, career opportunities for, you know, people of color and women?
Well, I think any success that the company has enjoyed over the last 25, 30 years is an absolute direct result of decisions made that we are going to be a people and community driven business. We're going to continue to make great products and sell great products, but we're going to glorify people instead of product, because that makes us look like, it makes us reflect the people that we serve and that we count on, and the people that work here and work for us. Is it perfect? No, I don't think it's perfect anywhere, but the fact that a business is people-minded and community-minded and wants to be known and seen that way, and then takes the actions and puts its dollars behind making that happen, ultimately outcompetes companies that don't. And the people focus is what's driven, is as much as it sounds like Mother God and apple pie and country to people, that's the difference. That's what's made the company successful. That's why people around the world tattoo the name onto their bodies, is we appreciate these people, this organization, for what they do, yeah, and who they are. And they're awesome. Their values are in sync with mine. I'm proud to, look, got it on my body here somewhere. I'm never without it.
Definitely. Okay, got another question for Vernice from Cynthia. What were your experiences like in being a police person or being in the military and being openly gay and a Black woman?
Hey, Cynthia, thanks for the question. So in the military, I was not openly gay because you couldn't be openly gay, right? And during my Marine Corps career, it was don't ask, don't tell. They didn't ask, I didn't tell, but they could probably tell. On the police department, I mean, we were just, really was like the thin line of blue. All the guys were like my big brother. When I rode motors, Harley Davidson Road King, 1350, right, Ken? My partner looked like Mr. Clean in the flesh, and I was like his little sister. He took care of me. So I had an absolutely amazing experience of brotherhood, sisterhood. And now in the Marine Corps, not so much. It was very different. 6 months before I got to flight school, they had a fly-in of all the aircraft. And one of my friends who was there during the fly-in, the guy got out, the pilot, and told, all right, all the women get out of line because we don't want you in this aircraft anyway. I'm like, really? That guy could have been one of the senior captains in my squadron when I got there, because it was the aircraft that I ended up flying. So it was an interesting experience. I was always, I feel emboldened to be who I was, even when I was in the Army and ROTC program as a cadet, to be a future leader in the Army as an officer. But the Marine Corps, I'm third generation Marine Corps, by the way. I remember being upset about something. I was like, Sergeant Major, you don't want gay people in the military anyway. And he was like, now, hold on, right? So didn't kick me out. So there's compassion, and the word you used, Ken, empathy for folks. But again, we had to have policy shift to be able to do something different as a community. So my experiences were amazing, unique. There are some things I would never wish on my worst enemy, some things I would never want to go through again. And I wouldn't change a single thing because it made me the woman I am today.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answered your question, Cynthia.
We'll see if she chats us back in. Got one last question here for Ken. In the military, they have don't ask, don't tell. What does that look like in the corporate world, and how do you think military policy has shaped corporate culture in the United States?
I think regardless of whether there's a military equation or not, and Vernice, you alluded to it earlier, this notion where people who aren't encouraged to speak up don't speak up. And they would rather walk away unhappy and go to another job than face the real or imaginary consequences of having to say something potentially negative or fiery to a superior or leader. That's an absolutely horrible, dehumanizing dynamic. And again, Ken, this comes back to leadership philosophy and what kind of business culture you want to have. Employees who are encouraged and actually incentivized to speak up because they're not shot down for being the bearer of bad news, or not shot down because their idea wasn't great. Those are employees who stick around and feel valued. An employee who doesn't feel valued is never going to speak up. Don't ask, don't tell. I mean, that's it right there. I'm afraid to speak up because I'm afraid of what will happen if I do. That's not an employee problem. That's a leadership problem, because that's the culture that's being sustained there. Very easily fixable.
Agreed. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Vernice. Thank you,
Ken. Can I just say one thing? I know we got like T-minus 20 seconds. We are a country of good people. We just have to step up with the good behavior and make the good decision and stay gutsy. That's it. That's all I got. And hit me up, LinkedIn, Twitter, Insta. I'm out there. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken, very much. And Vernice. Bye, all.
Cleared hot.